Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Gopi Chanda Vallabha Jaya Giri Varadari Jaya Giri Varadari Gopi Chanda Vallabha Jaya Giri Varadari Jaya Giri Varadari Yasoda Nandana Jaya Braja Jannaranjana Jaya Braja Jannaranjana Jaya Yasoda Nandana Jaya Braja Jannaranjana Jaya Braja Jannaranjana Jaya Jamuna Tirvanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Jamuna Tirvanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Jamuna Tirvanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Chanda Vallabha Jaya Giri Varadari Jaya Giri Varadari Gopi Chanda Vallabha Jaya Giri Varadari Jaya Giri Varadari Yasodanandana Jaya Brajidandaranjana Jaya Brajidandaranjana Jaya Yasodanandana Jaya Brajidandaranjana Jaya Brajidandaranjana Jaya Jamunatiravannachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Jamunatiravannachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitya Gaura Haribo, 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 Gaura Haribo. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Prabhupada Tada Sadashi Śrīmad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Śrīmad Bhāgavatam Grantharaj Ki Jai. Gaura Premanandi Hari Hari. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Agyantimananjasha Jananjana Salakya Chakshuram Malitanjana Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha. Reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 23, Maharaj Prithu's going back home. Text number 16. 16? Kanyakashe dravam toye yatastanam vibhagasha siddhim ambasi tattejasi adovayo nabhasyamam kanyakashe dravam toye yatastanam vibhagasha siddhim ambasi tat tejasi adhovayo nabhasyamam kanyakashe drivam toye yatastanam vibhagasha siddhim ambasi tat tejasi adobhayo nabhasyamam. Kanhi. The different holes in the body for the sense organs. Akashe, in the sky. Dravam, the liquid substance. Toye, in the water. Yathastanam, according to the proper situation. Vibhagasaha, they are divided. Shitim, earth. Ambasi, in the water. Tat, that. Tejasi, in the fire. Adha, the fire. Vayo, in the air. Nabasi, in the sky. Amum, that. In this way, according to the different positions of the various parts of the body, Prithu Maharaj merged the wholes of his senses with the sky. His bodily liquids, such as blood and various secretions, with the totality of water. And he merged earth with water, then water with fire, fire with air, air with sky, and so on. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta, Swami Prabhupada. In this verse, two words are very important. Yathastanam vibhagasaha. So they're sort of dual compound words. In Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, 2nd canto, 5th chapter, Lord Brahma clearly explained to Narada how the creation took place, and he explained one step after another the proper divisions of the senses, the controller of the senses, the objects of the senses, and the material elements, and he also explained how they are created one after another. The air from the sky, the fire from the air, the water from the fire, the earth from the water, etc. It is important to know thoroughly the process of creation as it applies to this cosmic manifestation. Similarly, this body is also created according to the same process by the Supreme Lord. The personality of Godhead, after entering the universe, creates the cosmic manifestations one after another. Similarly, the living entity, after entering a womb of a mother, also collects his gross and subtle bodies, taking ingredients from the totality of sky, air, fire, water, and earth. The words Yathastanam Vibhagasaha indicate that one should know the process of creation and should meditate upon the creative process inversely and thus become free from material contamination. So here, the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam is describing this chapter is called Maharaj Prithu's going back home. And of course, we understand that going back home means going back to the spiritual world, where the personality of Godhead lives with unlimited spirit souls in their spiritual forms, engaged in eternal spiritual activities. So, but this and this process is very scientifically described here in the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, and is described here that by understanding how the creation of the whole material universe is created after the Lord enters into the material universes, we can also understand how the material bodies, the individual bodies of all living entities are created in a similar way after the living entity enters into the material body. And if one knows that process, then to become free from the material body and from the material universes, a person who has that spiritual knowledge, the bhaktas, they can reverse that process and become free and go back to the spiritual world, if they so desire. So, now, this in the Bhagavad Gita, it describes this a little bit in summary. Now, in the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, text number 8, it says, Sariram yad avapnoti yatschap yud krama tishvaraha grihit vaitani samyati vayor gandhan iva shayat. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another. As the air carries aromas, thus he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. So, in the previous verse, verse 7, Krishna has explained that the living entities in this conditioned world, so they're forcefully taking these material bodies, he says, they are my eternal fragmental parts. So they're eternal individuals. Due to conditioned life, they're struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. So because the living entity is eternal, that means that he is changing in this world from one body, and the same individual soul is then getting another body. And then from that body he gets another body. Generally, in the Vedas, people understand that if they pray to the different demigods, they may be able to go to the heavenly planets where the demigods reside, or to where the forefathers live, the Pitraloka. And then after utilising all the pious results that allowed them to live in those heavenly places, they again come back down to earth. And then again they perform pious activities, and then they go back up to heaven, unless they make some mistakes, and then they go down to hell. But what happens is that after doing this, it dawns on them that there's, something which is, if I'm able to go up there and get a demigod, if I have this body now and then go and get a demigod's body, then, there's a constant individual that's changing bodies. So that dawns upon them after many, many lifetimes. Gradually they understand. It just sort of clicks in. So I'm already a person, but I'm changing bodies. So because it's not possible for us to change our body unless we're permanent. So just like every time we wake up in the morning, we have a shower, put some new clothes on, that doesn't mean we become a different person. Every time we change our clothes, we become a different person because we're dressed in a certain way. Although, actually, because people have such a fickle understanding of themselves these days, that's exactly what they do. They imitate the pop stars, right? That they change everything, all their hair, all their clothes. You can barely recognise who it is. Is that Madonna? Really? But so they feel that they're changing their identity, their personality. But anyone can see, no, that's the same person. There was Michael Jackson, he used to have different features. Now, now features look a little bit more triangular, something a little bit more plastic. So, so therefore, that's the first understanding of how this change of body happens. It's not possible unless there's a permanent soul. So those living entities, we're all eternal, and thus we can, and it says that due to conditioned life they're struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. Of course, these days we have 7 senses plus the mind. So we also have our iPhones. It's the 7th sense. So, so we're struggling with our senses and our phones. And they're all grouped about the mind. So the subtle body, because we have a particular mindset, we get a particular body that suits that mindset, that way we're thinking. And that subtle body, the mind, when this body, the gross body, finishes, the soul in the subtle body carries one into one's next life. And then the gross senses from the gross elements form the gross covering of senses around the subtle body and the subtle senses. Therefore, in the verse 9 it says, the living entity thus takes another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. So whenever I think of this verse, as a child we used to have what was called Mr. Potato Head. So it was I don't know if anyone's ever seen that. Have you seen that, Mr. Potato? So it was like a potato shape, but you could change all the different senses of his body, and that was part of the game. So you could give him different eyes, different eyebrows, different ears, different lips, different arms, different legs, a little bit of hair, sometimes a hat. So, basically it was the same Mr. Potato Head, but he got a different set of, and it was a lot of fun. So, and each time you changed, those different set of senses, he looked like a different sort of a character who did different things in this world. So we're all like Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head. We come into this world and we just, attach a whole bunch of different senses. So it's quite mechanical when you think. It's like, we say that Mr. Ford, he was considered the person we give credit to for the automating, what do they call that, mass producing cars and that, instead of building one car at a time, there's basically, they go along the roller belt, and the doors are already there, the everything, you just attach them and it just sort of rolls off as a car at the end. So creating the body, actually Krishna is the originator of that idea, right? So, you just take from that body of senses, etc., and elements, and the living entity comes in with this subtle body, and they just get that different group according to, whether you want a four-wheel drive, a little sports car type body, or a little mini miner, or a big Hummer. So it's exactly the same. So now, here it goes on to say that, verse 10, the foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sort of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But those whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. The endeavouring transcendentalists who are situated in self-realization can see all this clearly. So one who understands the nature of the spirit soul, they can see all this. And they understand the nature of the Supreme Soul. They can see all this clearly. But those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try to. So, now this, as that verse 7 describes it, in this process, when we get this material body, now whether we get a body of a demigod, the body of a human, Indian, American, Australian, Chinese, or the body of a dog, or the body of a cat, we struggle for existence in this material world because we have 4 major problems that every living entity from Brahma down to the little germ are facing, and that is, one is forced to repeatedly take birth, death, and in between there's old age and disease. So these problems are continuous for millions and millions and millions of lifetimes. So therefore, one who understands that if I'm eternal and changing bodies, why do I need to go through this process of death when it's something that's foreign to me? So I have to be permanent in order to change bodies. If I'm permanent, then why change a body? Why not just get a permanent situation? So of course, that permanent situation cannot be had with the material body because it is destructible. And so what happens, of course, is that instead of solving that problem, because we have we actually take a particular set of senses, because in our subtle body, our mind, we want to actually enjoy a particular set of sense objects. So every species of life, you see that certain senses, generally in most species of life, one is very prominent. In human beings, all their senses are prominent. And so humans tend to want to enjoy a great variety of all the different sense objects fully, whereas in many species of life they're generally particularly interested in, a much more limited enjoyment of sense objects. And that becomes the problem, as described in that Bhagavad Gita, is struggling with the 6 senses in the mind, that we're always facing happiness and distress in relationship to the how our senses are experiencing this world. Now, Krishna says, so our whole civilization is based upon not solving the actual problems, birth, death, old age, and disease. We solve that, we solve all the problems of life wholesale, everything. If we don't take another material body, all the problems we face having a material body are solved. But in our civilization, instead of trying to solve birth, death, old age and disease by coming to a permanent position on the spiritual platform, we spend our time trying to solve this problem of enjoying the senses in the material world, where there's always happiness and distress. Now, Krishna, he gives, in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, you can solve all of those problems related to happiness, distress, very easily. And he says, you just tolerate. No, that's it. That's it. Problem solved. It's pretty easy. It's in the Bhagavad Gita. And Prabhupada was saying that. He was speaking on these verses. He was saying that's how you solve all the problems of life. You tolerate. So, of course, in our modern scientific world, you know, if there's some difficulty to raise the toothbrush from the, you know, about the waist level all the way up to the mouth, which could be, you know, quite difficult for a lot of people. So we invent the electric toothbrush and, you know, well, what we also need is a little elbow push-up, like that, you know. Like that. So much trouble, so much difficulty. And the whole civilization, that if there's a little problem, you know, for instance, I quite often see people, you know, because now we're in winter, and they're freezing, and they're thinking, let me get inside, oh, the heater's not working, there's no electricity. And I think to myself, why don't you just put a jumper on? Because they don't have a jumper on, right? They don't think like that anymore. You know, all problems are solved by electricity, heaters, something, you know, technologically. And you think, you know, why not put a jumper on? Like that. It's really easy. Actually, the previous generation, you know, we sometimes think, how did the previous generation, how did they even manage, you know, without all the technological advancement that we have? They must have been so cold and so hot and so. But they didn't, because actually they just tolerated. You know, we wonder, how did they get on? They actually tolerated so much. And my mother's 80 years old, over 80. Every day, without fail, even if she's sick, throughout winter, throughout summer, she'll go and sit out in the porch and sit there for hours. Throughout the day, she'll spend several hours just sitting out the porch, people looking at her garden, looking at the flowers growing. People will walk past. They all know her, everyone, you know. It's very strange because no one knows any old people these days, but they all know my mum. Because she's always sitting on the porch. But I got her a heater. It was like you know, you can turn it on, heat comes out, cools in the summer. Very rarely use it. She just doesn't need it because over the course of a lifetime, she just used to it. She just accommodates to a certain degree. So that generation would do that. I remember as a teenager, I was a bit of a hippie. Prabhupada noticed within the hippies, especially in America, that, you know, they had that ability, they were like that as well, that they would just sleep on the street, outdoors. You know, at the end of the day, wherever they happen to be, we'll just lay down somewhere in the park, on the streets, you know, because Prabhupada used to say that. He said, you see them, the hippies, they're sleeping on the streets, you know. And but they didn't seem to mind because they just tolerated. They actually wanted to turn their back on, you know, this constant, scientific advancement, you know, for the sake of making things so complicated. They wanted things to be a little bit more natural, and they just had that sense. But, of course, you know, there were many things that they didn't understand. Prabhupada, you know, he saw that within them, but he said that, but they had no direction. You know, so there was detachment there, but, you know, they were up and down into all sorts of things because they had no real guidance and direction. So a little guidance, then, you know, they could properly utilise that. So as a young teenager, I was quite interested in that concept where just by the control of the mind, you could actually rise above, the happiness and distress of the world. And probably one of the biggest breakthroughs I had when I was a teenager, I used to get this, I don't know what it was called, but my glands in my throat, it was glandular fever or something, but it was almost like, you had knives sticking in your throat. It was so painful. It was like you had glass, if you moved your mouth, it was like broken glass in your throat, and that was just so painful, so very painful. Eyes running, splitting headache, body aching, sometimes fever, blocked nose, everything like that. Could barely breathe, could barely talk. I used to get that a lot for some reason. Well, I know the reason. I was a hippie doing all sorts of nonsense. So my immune system was sort of, ruined, and so I was getting ill. But anyway, one day I was so ill that this friend of mine, they took me to a meditation place where it was natural healing. And what they got me to do was to lay down on a table. There was some cushions there, and they said just close your eyes and meditate, because I was so blocked up I could barely breathe and it was a lot of pain, and they said just meditate that you're in a rose garden, and they would say, can you, so you got your eyes shut, and they'd say, can you see the roses? Yes. Okay, take one of those roses. Smell the rose. So I'm smelling the rose. Can you smell the rose? Yes. So just breathe in the aroma of that rose. And so I did that. So at one stage I kept doing that and breathing very deep like that. And they tapped me after some time. Now I thought I'd only been there for a couple of minutes, but they said I'd been there for like 20, 25 minutes or something. It was almost like I disappeared. And when I sat up off that table, I had no symptoms of the illness that I walked into that room with. So not only had I mentally overridden, but literally physically, because of such a change in the subtle body, I literally walked, I could breathe, I had no headache, I hadn't, everything gone. Literally walked out, I thought, gee, that was really good. And since then, I actually started to do, more, meditation and, just trying to develop that ability. And, Prabhupada explains it because you just take your consciousness, it's that principle of tolerating. When you tolerate means, okay, there's so much cold, so much heat, let me just not think about it too much. Just take my mind away from it to something else, something better. Because for us, that's Krishna. That works really well. Should try it. But for others, it may be roses. But so you imagine with the potency of Krishna compared to just even, just thinking of something that isn't there. Prabhupada explains that one time he was watching this friend of his family doctor who was going to operate on a child. They had, I think they had a boil or something on their leg, and they had to lance it, a lot of pain. And Prabhupada said to the doctor, "Oh, you're going to give some anaesthetic or something?" He said, "No need. It's a child. They won't feel it because the consciousness is not there." And Prabhupada watched, and the doctor, cut and what have you, and the child made no indication that there was any pain or anything because the consciousness was somewhere else. And so now as a devotee, I had a similar experience, but on a more transcendental level. I remember might have been 79 or 1980, I was I was in Tasmania. I was a Brahmachari. I was with Aniruddha Prabhu and Pushpanjali, I think it was. So there was about 3 or 4 of us, and we were staying in a cave. We were doing Sankirtan over there. And Tasmania, of course, gets very, very cold. And I actually got this similar illness, exactly the same, with the throat and everything like that. And I was so ill. Of course, in those days, as a Brahmachari, we never went to the doctor. It just wasn't in the program. It wasn't within the jurisdiction of management. I remember one time I was on Sankirtan and I got attacked. Someone smashed me over the head with might have been an iron bar from behind, knocked this tooth, still there, right out of my head, that's why I don't have that tooth, and split my nose, black eye like that, knocked me out, and stole all my Sankirtan money. Anyway, I went back to the temple. I got 1 day off Sankirtan. And that was, they were being kind to me. So, but anyway, so we didn't go to the doctors. I was really suffering. I had this. So when I went to sleep, I dreamt that my spiritual master appeared to me in my dream. And I said, "Oh, so Gurudev, you've flown in?" And he sort of looked at me and smiled. I said, "Oh, Gurudev, I'm so sick. I don't know if I can do my service." He said, "Oh." So he had this jar, and like a clear jar, and then he lifted off the lid, and there was Maha sweets in there. And he said, "Oh, have one of these." So I dipped my hand in, and I had one Maha sweet. And I ate that Maha sweet, and I thought, "Oh, they're really nice." And I went to dip in and get another one, and he said, "No, that's all you need." And he put the lid on, and then he disappeared. And I woke up, and when I woke up, I was in so much bliss that I had no sense. I could actually feel, like with the headache, sometimes your head is throbbing with the pain and everything like that. I could feel all the symptoms of the illness, and I had no sensation of any pain at all. It was like I was just floating in bliss, like a little soul separated from the body, from that. So you can imagine that at the time of death, by the grace of Krishna, that the experience of death for a devotee is different. That Krishna can just detach you from that situation. So, therefore, when I became a devotee, I really enjoyed the concept of the austerities that devotees performed, because, the devotees were just tolerating everything. They weren't doing it, to fix their illness or, to be a hippie or the devotees were tolerating happiness and distress, the senses, because they wanted to help people in this world, detach themselves from the material body and go back home, back to Godhead. So there was a whole dimension of purpose. So you're not practicing that just for your own pleasure, but you're practicing the same thing. You're getting all the benefits of just tolerating, and at the same time you're doing it because you're particularly wanting to help people. Because you can see, as mentioned in that verse, Prabhupada mentions that even if others who are not trained in self-realization, even if they try to understand how we get these material bodies, how we get rid of these material bodies, how the universe is created, how it's, the universe is dissolved, they can't understand. So, therefore, as we said, Prabhupada saw that there was detachment, but they used to speak in terms of, sometimes, like in 1966, they were asking Srila Prabhupada, what do you think about cosmic consciousness? Because cosmic consciousness, Prabhupada would, quite often say, what do you mean? And then they would give some answer, and you go, what do you mean? And then they would give some answer, what do you mean? And then they would and then Prabhupada would say, so you really don't know, because literally they had no real concept. It was hip, It was hip to be like that. So anyway, but they really had no idea. It was fashionable. I'm in cosmic consciousness. But, their idea was that if you transcended the body, then your consciousness somehow merged with the consciousness of the universe, the cosmos. That they felt that they had some sense that there was an intelligence within the universe, and that by rising above, the way to solve the problems of happiness and distress in this world was not necessarily by tolerating it, but by rising up to cosmic consciousness, where you are as great as the whole universe, like that. So that was their solution. So now, and that is because, and this is where Srila Prabhupada came in and taught them the principles of the Bhagavad Gita, and he explained this to people who would ask those questions, that actually you are an individual, and they would say, yes, but don't you merge? When you see here in this verse, it says, Prithi Maharaj, he merged the wholes of his senses with the sky. So, these terms are there. He's merging this and merging that, and gradually, they feel that, Prithi Maharaj will merge and become in cosmic consciousness, become one. But actually, what we see here is that this one individual is doing that. Not everyone all at once, but just one person, and other individuals are not. So and Prabhupada said, actually, you're an individual, but you're merged in the material energy already. Because, basically, it's like this, that, if an aeroplane flies in the sky and you're watching it, and then it just, little point, and then it just disappears, and you say, it's merged into the sky. See? So that's our position. The material energy is so vast, and we're such a tiny little, Prabhupada said in those days, he said, spiritual atom. He said this material energy, if you look at it, it all comes down to all these individual atoms, and we're a little spiritual atom, eternally individual, and we've merged into the material energy. Like that. Just like an aeroplane flying into the sky, and it just merges. But we know that although we can't see that aeroplane, still that aeroplane is there. There's so many passengers, there's so many activities like that. Or, as I think it was Ramanujacharya mentions, that sometimes a green bird flies into a green tree, and we think, it's merged. But actually, the bird is different with so many other birds, and it's probably got a little family there. As we know from Bhagavatam, in every species of life, same thing is going on. So, Prabhupada said, therefore, he said, when you merge become one with the spiritual energy, you still also keep your individuality. In other words, if we're merged into the material energy and we still have our individuality, then certainly when we merge into the spiritual energy, we also keep our spiritual individuality. So, now, And that is because, Prabhupada said, here, as we learn from this verse, because we're a spiritual atom, an eternal spiritual atom, when the spiritual atom enters into the body, into the womb of the mother, the body develops. If there's no life there, the body will not develop. No body will develop until the spiritual atom, which is symptomized by pure consciousness. The spiritual atom is literally an atomic particle of pure consciousness. That's what a spiritual atom is. When that enters within the womb, then the body will develop, otherwise the body will not develop. And similarly, Srila Prabhupada says, when you go to Krishna in the spiritual world, the spiritual atom, it develops the spiritual body, and you go to Krishna in your spiritual form. So, again, in those same verses that we read, I'll just read a little bit what Prabhupada says about that in the purport. Okay. So, right. So, in this verse, Bhagavad Gita 15:7, Srila Prabhupada says this, that it is stated that when a living entity gives up this material embodiment and enters into the spiritual world, he revives his spiritual body, and in his spiritual body he can see the Supreme Personality face to face. He can hear and speak to him face to face, and he can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead as he is. In the spiritual planet, everyone lives in bodies featured like the Supreme Personality of Godheads. As far as bodily construction is concerned, there is no difference between the part and parcel living entities and the expansions of Vishnumurti. In other words, at liberation, the living entity gets a spiritual body by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, the way that Prabhupada words that the atomic, we know that the atomic, the spirit soul, its dimension is, if you take the tip of the hair, the very tip of it, the smallest part of it at the end, and divide that into 1/10,000th a part, something which cannot be seen by any material scientific apparatus, that is the dimension of the soul. And that atomic spiritual particle of pure consciousness leaving this body, Srila Prabhupada says, as that spirit soul can develop this material body around it, that spirit soul can develop the spiritual body, which when one goes to Krishna, one sees Krishna face to face. So, and one gets a body exactly like the Lord, if one meditates upon that. Krishna says, Ye yata mam prabhajante tamstatha vijamyaham. I'm mixing, yeah, that's right. And as one surrenders unto me, I reward them accordingly. So, in that verse there, again, Srila Prabhupada says the same things. Now that verse is a couple of verses after the verse where Krishna says, if you can understand my birth and activities in this world, that they're all spiritual, you understand my spiritual form, personality, upon leaving this body, you will not take birth again. And in the 15th chapter it says, where do you go? You go to the spiritual world, and you get a form like Krishna's. So in that verse, text number 11, Srila Prabhupada again describes this process of getting a spiritual body. Says, in the transcendental world also, Krishna reciprocates with his pure devotees in the transcendental attitude, just as the devotee wants him. One devotee may want Krishna as the supreme master, another as his personal friend, another as his son, and still another as his lover. Krishna rewards all the devotees equally according to their different intensities of love for him. Okay, so if we develop that love for Krishna, then determines the particular spiritual features that develop around the the spirit soul, manifests as this beautiful spiritual form, which is exactly appropriate to reciprocate with Krishna in that particular mood of love. So the form is completely compatible with one's mood of love of God. So if we develop the love for God, then that's how the spiritual body manifests. And now, there's a story, how potent... Now, you can imagine the devotees. Now, the devotees are actually trying to preach Krishna consciousness, which Krishna says, there is no one in this world more dear to me than that person who's trying to preach. And in preaching, the devotees are themselves always remembering Krishna, because they're serving Krishna, and they're helping others to remember Krishna. And that is developing their love for Krishna, which is developing their spiritual body, which they will receive. Now, there was one demon called Pundraka. You know Pundraka? Pundraka, he sent a message to Krishna in Dwarka that I am Vasudeva, who's descended out of my causeless mercy to deliver all the conditioned souls in this material world. So, Krishna, you rascal, you give up these symbols, because otherwise there'll be a battle and I will have to kill you. So this Pundraka, he was so absorbed in envy of Krishna, that I will be Krishna, that he took all the symbols of Krishna. So he had the conch, and the disc, and the club. He had the garland, the kastuba. I think he even had the Srivats. I'm not sure if there's a picture there. I'd like to see the picture. Did he have the 4 arms? Yeah. He did. Yeah. That's what I thought. He had, in the picture, he had it. So he'd actually... So it was all decoration. Right? So even he had the 4 arms. So when Krishna received this letter with all the, his friends, they laughed and they laughed and they laughed for a long time to their full satisfaction. And then Krishna decided, enough's enough. We'll have to go and kill him. So he went there. He sent him a letter, right. He sent him a letter first. Thank you. And actually, I'm telling this story because as we're driving, Srimurti always reads me these Krishna stories, and this one popped back into my head because it was so appropriate to this verse. Anyway, so if I miss any details, you can tell me. But so anyway, they got to Kasi, where, because Pundraka was staying with his friend, the king of Kasi, the king of the Kalingas. And Kasi, is that Varanasi? Yeah, where Lord Shiva, Lord Shiva resides there as Vishwanath. There's a temple still there to this day of Vishwanath, very famous. Lord Chaitanya went there, and sometimes they call him Vishveshwara. Anyway, so then, to cut a long story short anyway, basically Krishna asked him, to give up. There were some fighting words, and Krishna told him, to give up, and there was a challenge there. So anyway, Krishna, he shot some arrows, and his, the chariot just disintegrated into a million bits, and then he, with his Sudarshan chakra, he cut off his head. Now, that Pundraka, because he was killed by Krishna, he was actually destroyed by all his offences were destroyed, because Krishna killed him. Yeah, by the touch of Krishna. And therefore, because he was always meditating on the form of the Lord, he attained Sarupya Mukti. And he went to Vaikuntha and attained a form just like the Lord, like Vasudeva. Because that was his constant 24-hour-a-day meditation. Now, don't imitate that. Don't think, oh, why am I chanting all these rounds? Preaching Krishna consciousness. Don't make Krishna come here and kill you. He probably won't. And then God only knows what happens at the time that Maya kills you for being offended. So don't imitate that. But take this, that if we can somehow or another always meditate upon the form of the Lord, we actually get a form exactly like the Lord's, Satchidananda. Not that we become God, but we remain individuals, but it's appropriate to reciprocate with the Supreme Lord in love. Now, if a demon can attain that, imagine the success. That that is these pastimes are there because Krishna is letting us know. You serve me. Prabhupada would say, one lifetime, you chant 16 rounds, follow 4 regular principles, Krishna, preach Krishna consciousness. One lifetime, you go back to Godhead. You do it properly, one life, that's it. That's pretty good. So anyway, I'll just leave that there if anyone has any comments or questions on that. Yep. What's that?
How to beat the mind with shoes?
What's that?
How do we beat the mind with shoes?
How do we beat the mind with shoes? Yeah. So basically, what is it? It's at the end of the day, you beat the mind 100 times with a broomstick, and in the morning you beat it 100 times with shoes. Is that it? That's Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would say that. That's right. Yeah, that's the point. That see, there's also the broomstick. You can't leave out the broomstick. So it's 100 times with a broomstick. The broomstick is a real heavy beating. So, and if the mind's just playing up a little bit, okay, we can take it easy. It's just 100 times with the slippers. So the point is that 100 times beating means we really make sure that the mind doesn't think of anything else but Krishna. That's what it means. Beating the mind means that the mind is saying, I'm not going to chant my rounds today. Oh, is that right? It's a slipper. Or you might get the broom. So, we beat it. We just say to the mind, no, I'm not listening to you. That's another tolerance. I'm not listening. Not interested. I'm still here and I'm not chanting my rounds. That's all right. You're a rascal. I've listened to you for hundreds and hundreds of lifetimes, and you're nothing but a rascal. You always cause me trouble. All my troubles in the material world are because of you, you rascal. So you're beating the mind. You're really putting the mind in until it just whimpers away and just disappears. You're defeated. So, we preach to people. In a sense, we're giving them, a few taps with the slippers. But for our own mind, we preach stronger. You know? So we preach very gently with people. Their mind is saying so many things, and we try and stop their mind so they can finally listen to a devotee. But for our own mind, we're very strong. Our main preaching is to ourselves. That's the point. And that preaching is that we just treat the mind like a rascal. When you're beating someone with a broomstick, it means what a rascal that person is. They deserve the broomstick, right? Even the slipper, 100 times with the slipper. You're a big rascal. So, it means you treat the mind like the rascal it is. Raghunath Das Goswami, he says, why do I allow my mind to urinate on my consciousness every day like this? The mind is, brings these foul, thoughts into our head, and he prays like that, in all humility. Why do I let it do that? If a dog came up to you and urinated on you, what would you do? You'd probably beat it. But the mind does it. Oh, that's okay. That's my mind. It can do it any time it wants. You think your mind, you're supposed to be my friend. You're the last person I think you'd be urinating all over me. It makes it even worse. So, we treat the mind like that. If it causes us trouble, that saying you're not getting out of bed today to do your service, you're not going to chant your rounds, you're not going to read your sloka, whatever like that, you're going to, then we treat the mind like a rascal until it just runs away. Yeah. Yeah. And the second question, right? Yeah.
Where did Founder get the other two hands from?
I always thought that myself. How did he, attach these other two hands? So, it was all decoration. It describes there that everything he had was like cosmetic decoration. Nothing was the real thing in one sense. Like a performer on the stage, it describes it. And so, they laughed in the palace, but then when Krishna and Balaram went there, they laughed again when they saw him for a long, long time. They laughed so much, and it was so funny. But I always thought that, how foolish. But, as Prabhupada says, he had this conception that he was God, and then all his followers said, yes, we believe you're God, and that was the end of him. And that's what happens. Sometimes you get these gurus, they have some concept, I think I've got cosmic consciousness, or I'm God, or I'm Narayan, and then they get millions of people follow them, and that's the end of them. Then they think, oh yes, all this, I'm definitely God, like that. See? So, and even though they're a laughable joke, so when devotees see these imposter gods, we laugh, like Krishna did. We laugh at them and we laugh at the followers. It's a tragic comedy. A tragic comedy means it is so sad that they are so foolish, but it is so funny you can't stop laughing. It's a tragic comedy, yeah. But if you ever hear where he got those other two hands, let me know. But I've always thought that myself. How did he attach them, and why people were so foolish? That, they see him get dressed in the morning. Oh, the Shrivats, this, that, and the other two hands. Oh God. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. He was a king and everything. Oh.
You mentioned that in the spiritual world, problems like birth, old age, diseases, and death, they are not in the spiritual world. So then how does Krishna kill the demons every day?
Yeah, because when Krishna kills the demons, just like Krishna, he utilizes his different energies. Right? So because God is all spiritual, his energy is just spiritual. There is no material for God. but he can make his spiritual energy, Brahman, as we read, act materially. So the same energy for Krishna, he's acting spiritually, but the demons are acting materially. So, for instance, when you get to a set of traffic lights, there's one energy which is controlling everyone. And yet that same energy makes some people stop and makes some people go. But it's only one energy. So when Krishna's energy makes one serve Krishna, that's like go forward, you get the green light to spiritually to serve Krishna, that is Yogamaya. And when the same energy acts to make you oppose the service of Krishna, that is the Mahamaya, that is the same energy. Therefore, Prabhupada said, one of his disciples asked him about, who is Subhadra? And Prabhupada said, Subhadra is Durga Devi. And then, because the person who asked the question was a little bit more confused. Durga Devi, she's the goddess of the material energy. And Prabhupada said, yes. And he said, have you read Brahma Samhita? There it says that Radharani is also known as Durga. So, ultimately, God's one energy, Srimati Radharani, the full potency of the Lord, her expansion manifests as Durga Devi, or the different expansions of Durga. So, then they were saying to Srila Prabhupada, so does Durga Devi exist in the spiritual world? He said, no. But he says, but she exists in the spiritual world not as Durga, but as Yogamaya. So, in Vrindavan, Yogamaya, the spiritual energy which allows all the devotees to serve Krishna and love Krishna, she's personified as Purnamasi. And they all serve in Vrindavan under Purnamasi's arrangements, Yogamaya. They've got the green light. In Dwarka, that expansion of Yogamaya is Subhadra. And she's giving the green light. Everyone is serving there. A slightly different mood, but like that. And either in Dwarka or Vrindavan or Mathura, for the demons, they're under Mahamaya, Durga Devi. Now, one time someone asked Prabhupada, what was Arjuna's position when he refused to serve Krishna? And Prabhupada said he was under Mahamaya. So there's Arjuna right next to Krishna. And he's in... So Krishna's performing his spiritual pastimes, that's his Leela, in the Vasudeva feature. Arjuna's right next to him, and yet Prabhupada's saying that was a Mahamaya. Now we have to understand that, of course, for someone like Arjuna is placed under Mahamaya differently from us. When we're under Mahamaya, we've really forgotten our eternal relationship with Krishna. But Arjuna, even under Mahamaya, where he's refusing to serve Krishna, he still knows Krishna's God. And therefore he's asking questions to clear the path of understanding for us in the Bhagavad Gita, because he knows his God and he's clearing that understanding for us in his questions. But also, Arjuna being under Mahamaya is different from us because who did Arjuna marry? Subhadra. So, we can't compare us being under Mahamaya with Arjuna being under Mahamaya, but he was under Mahamaya. But he has a very close relationship with Subhadra. So it's a little different. It's not the same level. But there are different levels of where the conjunction of the spiritual energy and the material energy are there within the spiritual pastimes of Krishna. Like that. So Krishna can do anything. One energy, and he can do anything he likes, make it act in different ways. So the demons can come, and yet it doesn't touch the spiritual nature of Krishna. Yeah? So, yeah. I can't believe you understand that. That's we're trying to get someone to understand they're a spirit soul. I'm just speaking that. She said, that's good. Oh, good, thank you. But she does, I can see. Yeah, go on.
There are a couple of traditional answers to that question.
Yeah.
One is that in the spiritual world there's the appearance of demons. The Krishna has to come to the material world in order to relish that prospect.
Yeah, so that's right. Those killing of the demons doesn't happen in the Goloka, in the spiritual sky. They happen when Krishna comes here to this. So when Krishna comes with the spiritual world, in the conjunction of material and spiritual energy, they happen, but not in the spiritual sky. Yeah. Yeah. Did you have? There was another.
I think I already used up that too.
That's in that one. That's good. Very, very thick. Yes, go. Thanks for that. That's a nice comment.
A wide-ranging class. These verses about Maharaj Prithu returning all this material facility to Krishna. Can us humble atomic souls understand that through Yukta Vairagya? There's actually a very pertinent. I looked at the database in Vanapas for Yukta Vairagya and came up with 827.4, which describes how a devotee, as you were describing, it's really Prabhupada says that we don't so much worry about the different devotee processes, but we manage what we have.
Yes. So when we're the wonderful thing about, as it's mentioned in the end of Bhakti Yoga, the end of the 8th chapter, I'll read this one verse to you, that it says, text 28, it's the last verse of chapter 8, says, Vedashu jagishu tapashu cheva danashu yat punya palam parishtam ajeti tat sarvam vidam videtva yogi param stanam upaiti chadyam. A person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing sacrifices, undergoing austerities, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities. Simply by performing devotional service, he attains all these, and at the end he reaches the supreme eternal abode. So many of those things are automatic, but that means that the devotee perceives that they're getting the results of these very easily. So some of the things that may be done quite mechanically and with a little difficulty, the devotee automatically experience it. I told a story about getting the Maha Prasad in a dream. It was such an easy way by Krishna's grace, somehow, because I was undergoing a little difficulty to preach, that Krishna made some arrangement so I get a little taste of what yogis, spend lifetimes trying to do in a little Maha Prasad in my dream, and then I get the same experience. So, for a devotee, they experience these things, but it's much more automatic. And yes, there's no loss. Yeah. All right, yeah, one last question.
When Prithu Maharaj is
No, actually, in his age, because there are many yogis performing meditation, and they may not know that meditation means to meditate in such a way that you will attain a spiritual form in the spiritual world. So he's performing, just like one performs the activity of a king or a grihasta to show others how to do that, he's performing the activities of a yogi to show the yogis how to do it properly. Therefore, as we see, in this purport to the verse I read in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, text number 10. It says, the purport explains that. Right? So it describes, that it was verse number 11, described how the endeavouring transcendentalist, they can see everything clearly, changing bodies, but those whose minds are not developed cannot do so, though they may try to. And in the purport it says, there are many transcendentalists on the path of spiritual self-realization. So especially in the time of Pritha Maharaj, we can imagine how many are trying to... but one who is not situated in self-realization, which means that I am the eternal part of the Lord, a fragmental part of the Lord, tiny little part of the Supreme, that's self-realization, must be in connection with the Supreme. They cannot see how things are changing in the body of the living entity. The word yogina is significant in this connection. In the present day, there are many so-called yogis and there are many so-called associations of yogis, but they're actually blind in the matter of self-realization. They're simply addicted to some sort of gymnastic exercise and are satisfied if the body is well built and healthy. They have no other information. They are called yatanto pyakritamanha. Even though they're endeavouring in a so-called yoga system, they are not self-realized. Such people cannot understand the process of transmigration of the soul. Only those who are actually in the yoga system and have realized the self, the world, and the Supreme Lord, in other words, the bhakti yogis, those engaged in pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness, can understand how things are taking place. Because Pritha Maharaj is a bhakti yogi in his age, where there are people sincerely, properly trying to follow the path of self-realization, he's showing them that you must actually do it as a bhakta to do it properly. Yeah. Yep. All right. Good. Jai. Hare Krishna.